Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I am here with you at No Soundbites Allowed, and I'm just interested in talking with everyone. There's been so much going on, and I know I haven't been on as much as I usually am, and there's a couple of reasons for that, of course. This has been quite the experience for, I think, most of us going through the corona COVID-19 crisis. And it's had a lot of an impact on a lot of people. There's no doubt that there is a big concern for people on their emotional level, on their personal level, in trying to deal with this crisis and trying to survive this crisis. Not so much because the crisis is deadly, but more so because of the consequences of it. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. What are the consequences that we are seeing that are coming from COVID-19? And I'm going to be specifying New York State in particular, but this is not just a New York State thing. These are consequences that we are seeing across the nation that are affecting everyone. We're seeing this to some lesser or greater, well, actually lesser degrees everywhere else in the world, and especially in the United States. And we need to really understand this to understand what are we going to do in October when this comes back and we have round two? What are we going to do when the next thing hits, whether that's the flu or it's COVID-20 or the swine flu .2 or whatever it is? What have we learned from the coronavirus crisis that we can carry forward and be able to adjust and deal with this, especially when something else will come that is actually deadly? Now, let me qualify that, because a lot of people say, Mike, how can you possibly say that the coronavirus is not deadly? 48,000 people in the United States have died. How can you say it's not deadly? When I say deadly, I mean in an unnatural, far more than normal extent. Yes, coronavirus is incredibly contagious. It is not deadly. It is not the morbidity of it is not there, which is a good thing. And I'm happy to say that. And it hasn't mutated as the virus will eventually do. And it has not become more deadly, although it is starting to cross-contaminate into other animals. I believe the report just came out that it's now being found in cats. That's a problem, because that means it can mutate. But let's go with what we do know right now, and that is that there's been a lot of panic. There has been a lot of fear. Matter of fact, I was talking about that in an article I wrote, which was called, "Do You Agree Where COVID-19 Leads?" That was an article that I wrote at the mvoss.com site. You can see it for yourself. In that, which was on April 13th, we went through the impact of the news media, the impact of mortality rates, the business impact, which I'm going to go into a little bit more, and the unofficial government overreach. And the emphasis is that this, as I quoted in that article, the spread is far worse than scientists previously estimated. It also implies that only 1 in 1,000 people infected with COVID-19 require hospitalization. Actually, those numbers are, as we now know, more accurate than we had ever thought before. Far more accurate than we had ever thought before. And that's because COVID-19 has already been here. As many people, including myself, have said for quite some time, COVID-19 is not new. This has been around here for, some people believe, since January. I would say October. It's been around the world. And in fact, we know that based on the latest data, as we're getting antibodies being decided here, we've seen news that just came out, and Governor Cuomo was just speaking about it as of today, April 24th. And let me play what he said. And before I start, this is from MSNBC. And notice their tag here. What are they saying? Antibody tests show as many as 2.7 million New Yorkers have already survived the coronavirus. That COVID-19 already had 2.7 million people affected and survived. That's a critical thing. That's absolutely important. That is the start, and that should be the finish of the conversation. But here's what Governor Cuomo has to say about the fact that 2.7 million people already had coronavirus.
Yeah, no, it was surprising. We did a 3,000 person survey, which is fairly extensive, all throughout the state. Statewide, it was about 14% of the people had the antibodies, which means 14% of the people had the virus. That's about 2.7 million people in our state. New York City was close to 20%, which was surprising.
Yeah. Can you get that? Now, let's think about that for a second. According to Governor Cuomo, based on the science, 20% of New York City, almost 15% of upstate New York, or New York in whole, had coronavirus. Already got it. Already had it, already survived it. From day one, I was mentioning to people about the coronavirus back in February and March. I was telling people, you will survive. You are going to get through this. And now we have the confirmation. Yes, of course you were. You've already had it. Many people, and if we extrapolate these numbers across the world, if we look at what scientists have said as they reported back on April 13th, maybe 1 in 1,000 people are getting hospitalized, but 10 times as many people have been, or roughly 10 times as many people have already had coronavirus. And you already survived it. And you probably didn't even know it. Coronavirus is not deadly. Now, that's a big departure from what we got told by the news media. The news media hyped this, and I've been very much against this, and I've been speaking about this a lot. The news media put in an essence of fear that you are going to die, that if you got COVID-19, you are going to die, your neighbors are going to die, everyone's going to die. That was the message that was being pumped out for over a month. COVID-19 is going everywhere. Everyone's getting it, and you're going to die. Now, they didn't say it in those words. They said it in that it's highly contagious, that everyone's going to get it. And that the reason we're talking about this is because it's so contagious that everyone's going to get it, they left out the fact that everyone's going to survive. Because they leave out that essential number. In the reporting that you see, you don't hear about the number of survivors of COVID-19. You don't hear about the people who have recovered from COVID-19. You hear about how many people have caught it, how many more people has it spread to, how many people have died, but you don't hear how many people survived, how many people weren't hospitalized, how many people came out of the hospital. You don't hear about that number. And that's fear-mongering, in my opinion. You may disagree, but that's fear-mongering. When you're not getting all the data to make a conclusion, then that means someone is giving you imprecise information so that you get an imprecise conclusion, that you're being set up at that point for a result. And when I say it, and that's what the news media did. The news media said, hey, this is highly contagious. Tens of thousands of people are getting this around the world and in New York City. And you should be terrified. You have to isolate yourself. The government must force you to give up your rights, the First Amendment right to gather and assemble. You must give up your job. Businesses must shut down. This is essentially martial law without declaring martial law. Because if they ever said the word martial law, people would have revolted. But instead they said, be afraid. Be very afraid. Be terrified. Martial law is essentially in effect. You don't get to go to work. You don't get to do anything. You get to stay in your home. You can't even drive in your car to past a neighbor's house with a sign saying happy birthday unless you have your windows rolled up and you're wearing a mask. That's crazy. As I reported before, in Operation Crush COVID in Broome County, New York, County Executive Jason Garnar officially stated that people can't go outside except on the same day as even and odd based on your year of birth, which thankfully everyone in Broome County ignored. Yes, it's unofficial. It was not going to be enforced. But why would the government even say that? Why would county government say, this is what you're going to do unofficially? If it was unofficial, it would never have been said. The fact that an agent of the government, used the full power of the government to make an announcement telling people how restricted they were is insane. And we did that on the basis because the news media told us we're going to die. And that's terrifying because that gave the government the ability to have an overreach of power and to be able to do things we would never say yes to, and peer pressure. Because if you aren't following those rules, you too are responsible for someone dying. You're killing people by going outside without a mask on. You're killing people by going to work. That sounds insane. It sounds crazy, except that is what was being said. I believe it was, and I have it here, matter of fact, it's from the National Review on April 22nd, 2 days ago. Governor Cuomo pushes back on lockdown protesters, quote, partial quote, economic hardship doesn't equal death. This is from the National Review. Tobias Hoonhout wrote this, or Hoonhout. I apologize if I mispronounced his name. And what does Governor Cuomo say? Because he's being asked by a reporter about the people who want to go back to work, that people in New York State and around the country are gathering and saying, this isn't deadly. I want to go back to work. I want my life back because this isn't the death toll that you told us it was. This isn't Armageddon. And his answer essentially was, and I'm going to quote this, as quoted by the National Review, quote, economic hardship, yes, very bad, not death. Emotional stress from being locked in a house, very bad, not death. Domestic violence on the increase, very bad, not death. And the death of someone else. See, that's where we have to factor into the equation. Yeah, it's your life. Do whatever you want, but you're now responsible for my life. You have a responsibility to me. It's not just about you. You have a responsibility to me, right? Okay, that's what Governor Cuomo says. And my answer is wrong. Let me say that very much again. Wrong. No, it is not my responsibility. And no, it's not right. Now, let me make this very clear. Yes, I'm responsible. So if I see someone laying in the street bleeding to death, yes, it's a responsibility, if I can, to try and save that person's life. It is not my responsibility to lock myself inside my house so that someone else won't get a cold. It's not my responsibility to give up eating meat because someone else may want to be a vegetarian. Responsibility is limited. And Governor Cuomo is using his wording to imply that you have this moral obligation to hurt yourself so that you might help someone else. And he's saying that if you don't do it, well, you're an evil person, that you are killing someone, that you are responsible for someone's death. That's stupid. No. That's like saying that because I went to work today, someone who was driving drunk died or killed someone. That's not my responsibility. They're not connected things. I have no action. I have no agency in what that other person did. If I know someone is drunk at my job and they're getting into their car, do I have a responsibility to try and suggest that they shouldn't drive or to notify the police? Yes. Now I have agency. Now I'm involved. But when you separate that, no. When it's some random person on the other side of the state, I have nothing to do with that. And whether or not I went to work doesn't justify whether or not someone else got into a car and drove drunk. And I have to say, I am very upset about his answer about domestic violence. As we predicted here, and very few other sources even wanted to address this, when you lock people in their homes, which is incredibly stressful, when you take away their income, which is incredibly stressful, and you mix that with an element of domestic violence that already pre-exists or potentially had existed, yeah, that's something that you could have prevented and it didn't help. Same thing about suicides. When he says emotional stress, that's Governor Cuomo's way of saying suicide. He's talking about people killing themselves because they're locked in a house, isolated from every other person, so they don't have the social access that they would normally have that may have helped them, because they're stuck in their homes feeling badly about themselves and the doom and gloom that's coming across from the media. Yeah, that's what he's talking about. Very bad, not death. Yeah, actually, it is death. You're pushing people to commit suicide. There's a certain number of people, it's hard to say, and we're going to see the suicide numbers eventually, and I guarantee you they're going to be elevated because people are going to kill themselves more, sadly, because of this isolation forced upon them. And that is directly the responsibility of government, Governor Cuomo in particular, who said you have to be locked in your home. And yeah, I would even say, when you hear government like Broome County saying, oh, you have to be locked in your home and only let out every other day based on whatever day the year you were born, yeah, that's their responsibility. They bear the burden on some of those deaths. Is it nice? No. Is it fair? Very. They instilled that policy. They helped to instill that fear. They helped to create that scenario. And I have to ask the question, is that necessary? Well, according to Governor Cuomo, no, it's not necessary. If you want to work, go take a job as an essential worker. Really? What an arrogant thing for him to say. He is such a, well, I don't like using certain words on this program, but he's an ass. Because that's beyond arrogant. How dare you, Governor? How dare you? Not everyone can be an essential worker. That's why we have so many people. People do different jobs. Not all the jobs are as essential as every other job, but they are important and essential jobs to the businesses that run them, to the economy, to the people who work them. There is a reason why these jobs exist. If they weren't essential to someone or some facet of the government and the economy and the nation, they wouldn't exist. That's why businesses go out of business. One of the reasons. Because if it's not essential for that area, then it closes. That's just simple math. That's simple economics. That just happens. So that's an arrogant, stupid thing for Governor Cuomo to say. But let's really think about this. How many people really are being affected by the coronavirus? We know 2.7 million people survived. But what about the rest of them? Well, we know that 16,162 people have died as of the 24th, today, according to the New York Department of Health. We know that of those numbers, 89% had a pre-existing condition. 71% of them are people who are the age of 60 or older. Almost everyone who died from coronavirus, almost everyone, was older, and had an existing issue. That's not me making it up. That's not my feeling. Because this isn't about feelings. This is about facts. And those are the facts, as we can see it, as is documented. 2.7 million people didn't fall into this category for the most part, and they survived. Which brings me to a question. Is this worth it? You know, we saw that there were, remember, Governor Cuomo, we have to have ventilators. We have to have medical hospitals. We need more medical beds. The 500-bed U.S. Navy hospital ship Comfort, as reported by Business Insider, left New York. This is as of 2 days ago. Only 179 patients were seen in almost a month. That's it. Because we absolutely needed to have all the beds, according to Governor Cuomo. We absolutely had this crisis that was beyond everything we could possibly imagine. And I'm happy to say that wasn't true. That didn't happen. But we have to ask ourselves, why? Why was this such an absolute terror? Why were we so afraid? Why did we think we would need that? Because the news media told us that coronavirus was contagious and will kill you all. Everyone. 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds. Everyone's going to get it and everyone's going to die. That was the feeling that they wanted to put across to the world. But that's not the reality of what we see at all. This is essentially, according to the CDC, as of April 24th, we are looking at roughly a flu. Now, the flu, according to the CDC, could be has somewhere between 291 to 646,000 deaths worldwide, somewhere between 12,000 to 61,000 deaths in the United States every single year. Coronavirus is about 50,000 deaths as of the 24th. A third of that in New York City, which is an incredibly high number, and there's a problem with New York City right there. But what that tells us is it's a flu. This is essentially the flu. And it is done about what the flu does, maybe on the higher end. But it's essentially no deadlier than the flu. And I understand people are going to have a lot of feelings and maybe people are going to react to this, but it's essentially no deadlier than the flu. This is another flu. That's it. It's not astronomically worse. It's not the coming of the apocalypse. It's not unforeseen, that we can't handle it, that we can't deal with this, that this is something that's going to ravage the world. No, it's essentially the flu. It's in the realm of a flu. In fact, on a worldwide basis, a little bit less than a flu. In the United States, in New York City, take out New York City, and our numbers drop dramatically. But, okay. This is a flu. It's a very bad flu. It's affected a lot of people. And I know people are going to say, oh my God, you're just not being sensitive to this. Yes, I am. Every life is important, but every life shouldn't cause harm to another life. And we have to take into account what is the most reasonable thing for everyone. Is this worth it? And a lot of people, it's hard to say. I mean, is it worth it? I don't know. What we have done has cost New York State, according to CNBC, $13.3 billion. Now, that's an important number. Keep in mind, 2 years ago, in 2018, New York State lost $2 billion because of the economic policies of Governor Cuomo. Then when Governor Cuomo got a single-party, all-Democrat state government at the at the state level, the Assembly, the state Senate, when that all became nothing but Democrats, able to do any Democratic ideal that they wanted. But what we wound up with is a loss of $6 billion in 2019. So in 2 years, we lost $8 billion, which means Governor Cuomo has no idea what he's doing. The New York State government is doing a horrendous job. We lost, over the last 10 years, about 1.8 million people that left the state to go everywhere else but New York State. They took businesses with them. They took their educations. They took their money with them and left. And New York State lost money. As bad as that is, we lost $13 billion in a month. Let me say that again. It is expected we will lose $13.3 billion in 1 month, from March until April. 1 month. That's because we shut down the businesses. We unemployed millions of people. What is it? 32, 33 million people are unemployed at this moment in the United States. 33 million people in a month. Do you think that's going to affect the economy? Absolutely it will. It's destroying the economy. And as we had mentioned in a previous podcast, that's going to mean globally, the planet is in a recession. We are verging on a depression. We have more people unemployed in the United States alone than we have ever seen before. Well, almost more than we've ever seen before in a 1 month period of time. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we restart that? How do we get this going forward again? We're not getting back that 13 billion. How do we recover? And I have to say, there's one person who has an idea and it's going to make you laugh or cry. And there are some people who will cheer. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yes, the gift that keeps giving. The most stupid person in American government. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She wants low-income Americans to boycott work. Now, it's already interesting that Ms. Ocasio-Cortez was cheering the fact that the oil industry is having problems. And she deleted the post, of course, but she was happy that they're not available to work. And according to, this is Fox News, she states, quote, if you want your freedom, if you want to end the shutdown, then tell your president to make some damn tests and to support some state governments. Okay, let's think about that for a second. But we know 90% of the people affected are 60 and above, 70% are 60 and above. We know that roughly 90% of them are people with pre-existing conditions. We can work with that. We can make those conditions, even without the tests. And as we find the tests, we find out, 14% of the population already had it and already survived. This is survivable. The problem isn't whether or not we have a test. The problem is, why do we have so much hype and so much of an impression that people are going to die? And Ms. Ocasio-Cortez believes that, one of the best things we can do here is, this has been good for the environment, and so what we need to do is not go back, and let me quote her here, we're not going back to work 70-hour weeks just so that we can put food on the table and not even feel any sort of semblance of security in our lives. That is the biggest emotional manipulation that I've heard in quite some time. It's almost as bad as Governor Cuomo saying that he was doing a good job economically for New York State, which in the last 2 years, proof not. The fact that 1.8 million people have left the state is proof not. And as big a lie as that is, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has gone even further. This is the same woman that says, well, the only reason why people are doing okay is because they're working 2 and 3 jobs. Everyone's working 2 and 3 jobs. That's a lie. Roughly about 4% of the nation work 2 jobs. Not everyone, not the majority, not what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says. When she says we're not going back to working 70 hours a week, people aren't working 70 hours a week. That's just a lie. That is not correct. The majority of people who are low-income home workers aren't working 2 jobs, and they're not working 70 hours a week. This is not correct. Blatantly, factually, by data, not correct. Go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and look it up for yourself. It's not an accurate statement at all. But that's her answers. Well, poor people shouldn't go back to work. That's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says. We should not go to work. You don't go to work. You go to school instead and become part of the global eco-fanatical movement. That you can be part of the green energy, her green wave, Green New Deal, which doesn't work. You know what did work for the Green New Deal? You had to shut down the world to get what you wanted. Essentially, like many of us have said, they wanted to put the world back into the late Middle Ages, to take away decades of improvements of life, of opportunity, and lock people down in basically the early 1900s. That's what could save the world. And guess what? We did it for a month, and the world isn't happy. It isn't making people better. Their quality of life has not gone up. It's gone down. But that's what the Green New Deal requires. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez wants people to go into the failed industries of the Green New Deal. And I say it's failed because President Obama, all the way till today, have been trying to push this. The progressives, the Democratic Socialists have been pushing this idea and saying, hey, this is going to make everything work. And it doesn't. It hasn't worked ever, even when it's been subsidized by the government. Okay, so what is a good idea? What does work? I have a suggestion. And I've made this suggestion before to some government, and if you're still listening, I hope you're going to find this interesting, because I want to hear what your thoughts are on this. My thought is, at the local level, I have suggested and to local government, we already lost the money. The money's already gone. So let's help the small business that we can. I understand Congress just gave another $494 billion. I know we just spent $350 billion on small business, and it's still not enough. Well, let's do this instead. How about we zero out the local and state taxes, maybe even federal, starting June 1st. And then each month after that, go up by 0.5%, maybe 1%, depending on how well business is doing. Let's take away that extra burden. Let's give back to the small businesses that money that they would normally be paying the state. The state's already lost the money. We're already in the hole. We will make more money off of sales tax than we will off of taxing the corporations. We will be able to give more back to the businesses, which then gives to the workers and the people and gives them an opportunity to build up their cash and to be able to spend it. Let's cut the tax rate to 0, maybe 0.5%, and go up in increments per month by about 1% or so per month until we get to the full normal rate, allowing businesses the opportunity to rebuild, to stabilize, and to stay alive. Because we have lost somewhere around 10 to 15% of businesses. Not too long ago, I did a podcast, and I had noted that in the Utica region, as an example, Utica-Oneida County, what we found is that 52% of businesses expected to be able to reopen. 52%, half. The other half weren't sure if they could. 61% of businesses that are in existence in Oneida County had only 20% of the normal revenues that they would have throughout this month-long crisis. That's businesses dying. Most businesses, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, most businesses, 29% of businesses, only have reserves to be able to last them 1, maybe 2 months. That's it. 1 to 2 months. And then they have no more money. Then they close down. Well, when we restart the government, and I would love to say that tomorrow we're just going to go out there and they're going to say, hey, every business is open, go on outside. And people won't do it. And people aren't going to spend the money because they still have bills to pay. And they didn't have enough money to pay their bills. They still are behind and in the hole. $1,200 or not, people are still behind. They don't have discretionary money to really go out there and keep a lot of businesses going. So the question is, how do we do this? Again, my thought is, let's protect the small businesses, the engine of growth. The reason why our unemployment rate was previously was about 3.9% back in February. Let's go to there. Let's try and preserve those small businesses, keep them afloat as people go back to work, get money, and have the ability to pay their bills, and maybe something extra, they can then go out to these small businesses and move them forward. That, I think, is the answer. I think that's the critical answer. Not that that's what we're hearing from Governor Cuomo. He's saying that we have to remain isolated in our homes, prisoners under martial law until May 15th. I disagree with that. And I think a lot of people are disagreeing with that. That's why there was a protest just 3 days ago, in Albany. Why people are saying, no, I want to go back to work, both for their mental health and their economic health, because it's not one or the other, it's both. And to say that people are evil or they're not thinking about others around them, that doesn't mean going to work without precautions. It's not saying that we can't help our neighbors, but it does mean that, yeah, we got to do something about this. And we have to stop letting out criminals from our prisons for the flu, as New York State has done, which doesn't even go into bail reform. I won't even go into that. But how do we survive this? This is how I think we do it. Because I don't think low-income workers staying home, where are they getting the money from? What businesses are going to survive? Oh, they deserve more. Who's going to pay it? Where are they going to get that from? You can demand everything you want, but you don't get blood from a stone. If you break the stone, it's broken. You can't fix that. I mean, it's something that's very important to think about from these progressives. When I hear people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez speak, when they misstate things, when they try and use emotion to make you not think about the consequence of the actions. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is telling people not to go back to work. How are they going to live? When the businesses that they work at close because the workers aren't there, what are those people going to do? How do they survive? The government's just going to raise taxes on the people who are working to give it to someone who doesn't work? Well, that doesn't work well. That's a stupid idea. It doesn't survive. It's not self-sufficient. It's a dumb thing. Okay, so I've been saying a lot of things. I've covered a lot of ground, a lot of issues. I'm going to include links of everything that I've said in the video so that you can look it up for yourself and read through it and get all the details there. Look at the numbers yourself and tell me what you think. Do you think my idea for small business makes sense? Will that work at a local, a federal, a state level? Well, what is your suggestion? This is the time. We need to figure out how can we restart business. And Governor Cuomo's idea of, waiting until May or June or whenever it is he decides that he wants to give up the powers of martial law that he has instilled, when the local governments, decide that they're going to allow people to be released from their isolation in homes, not restricted by the day that they were born or the year they were born, but just actually go outside. How do we keep those businesses alive? How do we keep people's jobs intact? How do we make the cost of the coronavirus less than what it has already been? How do we not have just 13 billion lost, but not 20 billion lost? How do we get out of the recession that is happening globally? We're 5.9% GDP reduction globally. How are we going to get out of that? Because when we think about it, if we don't figure those things out, in October, COVID will be back. And we'll be going through the COVID-19 crisis again. And we're going to have the flu. And then there'll be the next thing, because there's always a next thing. It'll be another swine flu. It'll be another H1N1. It'll be another Ebola, another Zika. There's another virus out there. And we find one about every year. And there will be another one. Will it be COVID-20? Will it be the COVID-19 mutation? Something will happen. And what are we going to do then? What will we do if something is actually deadlier than a normal flu? What do we do then? Do we shut down the world again? Do you go back into isolation? Because at the moment, that's the only plan we have, is a government takeover with martial law that's undeclared, because if they declare it, you have certain rights under martial law. If they don't declare it, they can officially do almost anything, as we've seen some try. And then what happens next? I don't know. These are big issues. They're not all things that you can answer all at once. But we have to try. And this is one of my outreaches to you. So I hope that this would help. Please, if you've gotten this far, do make a comment. I really, really would appreciate that. I love to hear what you have to say. Also, please don't forget, subscribe, because that helps the show keep going. And it helps us reach other people and to get more thoughts. And obviously, YouTube, Facebook, they're not going to help with that. But I look forward to speaking to you soon. My name is Michael Voss. I am the Dragon of the Southern Tier. This is No Soundbites Allowed. You can reach us at 607-242-1582. You can text us, call us. You can reach us on Twitter at MVConsult. Next show we'll do will be live, and this way you'll be able to call in. But I look forward to talking to you then, because I know that you are going to be there. You have survived COVID-19, just as I always predicted. What are we going to do now? How do we survive the consequence of COVID-19? Let's talk about it. I'll talk to you soon.